Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Seattle Atheist Church. At Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you will never hear anything supernatural talked about from the podium. Probably should have thought about the creed before I walked up here. I may have to do this on the fly, but we are founded on the principles of scientific naturalism and secular ethics. Truth claims are attempted here, and we stand ready to revise our thinking in light of new information. We try to be excellent to other conscious beings, and we believe in good because good works in non-mysterious ways. So if that sounds good to you, then you are in the right place. And the way that we do it here is that everyone who is a member is invited, not required, but invited to give a talk. And so today we have a talk by Michael. The title of the talk is The War on Science, Justified or Not. So, without further ado.
Okay, we'll have to. Do we have chalk?
No. We don't have chalk.
Okay. There are very few things that I agree with. Very few ways that I agree with Heidegger, but there is one gem that dropped out of his philosophy, and that is this: we're thrown into the world at birth, and when we're thrown into the world, then we have to figure out how to deal with it. And there are different ways of dealing with it. One way is common sense, another way is through art, appreciation, another way is through logic. For him, another way is through grasping the true essence of being, the ultimate truth. I don't think he was very good at that. And another way is through science, which he deprecated, but which I think is the most reliable source of knowledge about how to deal with the world. Now, in breaking this down, no chalk, right?
There's no chalk.
That's all right. Well, I can get by. Well, one way of dealing with the world is with common sense, with intuition we're born with, which most of it came with evolution. Since our ancestors had to deal with the planet Earth, they evolved mechanisms for doing that, which work a large part of them work automatically. Then on top of that, there's common sense. There's a sense of beauty which guides our actions. A good example, let's say, is when you're with mushrooms. Let's say you're eating mushrooms and you get a stomachache. Well, that's common sense says you want to stay away with things that give you a common stomachache. So that's useful. 90% of what decisions are made on just reacting like that, not with science. Another way of dealing with the world is to add to our common sense, is to add tradition. So our tribe might have been found that certain mushrooms are poisonous, certain are not. So, and through tradition, we teach that to our children, and our children avoid the mushrooms without ever having contact with the mushroom or without ever having gotten a stomachache from one. So tradition does a lot for us. And of course, as we know, it's also misleading. The problem is we can't tell, when we look at tradition, it's very, very hard to say what's reliable and what's superstition. Now, with science, we have a method of gaining reliable information. So the real value of science is its reliability. It's more reliable. For example, when you go to a physician and you have a stomachache, the stomachache is common sense level. Now the physician can respond to that. The physician, through analogy, the physician knows what a stomachache feels like. Right? A physician, and even beyond analogy, that we have these mirror mechanisms, or something that functions like a mirror mechanism. So when we see someone with a stomachache, we react the same way, not the same way, but in a somewhat enough of a similar way, so we understand what's going on with that person. We might not have the stomachache ourselves, but we know what it is. We respond to it. Cats do too, dogs do too. Dogs have this capacity to an enormous extent. You see a cat hit by a car, he starts howling, and all the cats in the neighborhood could congregate on the wounded cat, and they could try to help it. So cats can do that too. So all of these are ways of knowing the world, which we use 90% of the time. So where does science come in? Well, science comes in when you have to go beyond that, beyond common sense, beyond tradition, beyond beauty, beyond what feels good. Science comes in when you're aiming for reliability, and you're willing to pay the price. Because the price of science is high. Doing research is very costly, time-consuming, takes a lot of effort. You can spend people spend their whole life studying stomach aches and what brings about stomach aches. They're specialists on gastronomic. So something about to do with gastros. When you tell the physician he has a stomach ache, you have a stomach ache, through common sense, he kind of knows what you're talking about. But he can go further. He pokes around and he does x-rays and so on. He might find you have appendicitis or a ruptured appendix, even worse. Now, 200 years ago, if you went to a physician with appendicitis, if you went to 10 physicians, you get 10 different answers. None of them would blame the appendix. They'd have all different kinds. They'd each have a different explanation. Bile, excessive bile, gas, an ulcer, cancer. They all come up with a different answer. But through scientific research, today, 10 out of 10 physicians, 9 out of 10, probably 10 out of 10 physicians will say, you got appendicitis. They'll all agree. Now that's something that's a disagreement kind of thing, is something that's common to science, and not to tradition, and not to common sense so much. So there's an advantage of science right there. Another advantage is, of course, it's effective, it's reliable in terms of what to do about it. 200 years ago, if you had appendicitis, you were 90% chance you were going to die. There wasn't much anybody could do about it. Today, there's a 90% chance that you won't die if it's operated on within 2 days. So that's a dramatic difference. Science has made up the differences. In 1900, the average life expectancy was 45 years old. Today, it's twice that. Now, it was 45. Now, the life expectancy has been 45 years old for thousands of years, as far as we can tell. And all of a sudden, bang, with the development of biology in the 19th century, by the time we get to the middle of the 20th century, the life expectancy has gone from 40 in 1900 to 80, 81, 82 in 2016, depending on what country you live in, or what part of what country. So the reliability is what science is all about. Now, there's a problem in that I can't go into it today. I'll just make the statement, and people can be upset or they can agree with me, whichever, but I'm afraid that's all the best I can do. But I'll say this. Throughout the 20th century, there's been the development of parametric and inferential statistics, which are supposed to make reliable decisions about the reliability of scientific research. They don't do it, they fail. The models don't apply. And this has become quite obvious in recent surveys of where competent people have tried to replicate competent research, and they can't do it. They can't get the replication. If you go back to if you're using modern statistical techniques, if you have an experiment in cancer, for example, I find that 50 to 70% of the research can't be replicated. And this is research run from the best journals. You know, the New England Journal of Medicine, Nature, Science. Nature did the study. One of the studies. There was dozens of them. So part of the war, so when you get to a thing like climate, now if you go back and look at the Louis Pasteur's work, or Lavoisier, or any of these old-time researchers, you could replicate their research today. If they say you're going to get certain results, you can go into the laboratory, do what they did, and get the same results. You can't do that with statistics, with statistical verification. This confuses the issue on things like climate change. But if you look at climate change, if you go back and you look at the solid data, and you use the solid techniques that Pasteur did, there's no doubt about climate change. If you go back to the kind of data collection, the sort of data that was being collected, the evidence is clear that the Industrial Revolution and various phases of the Industrial Revolution have increased and caused climate change. The correlation is extremely close. And it's only come about since 1800. The Industrial Revolution began in the 1760s. So by 1800, the waste had accumulated in the atmosphere, and it was measurable. All the different places in the world using entirely different techniques, but very reliable, very solid results. So, in terms of criticizing the war in science, now of course the enemies of science are the ones who claim that their way of knowing trumps science, is better than science. So you have your various religious sects. And, well, in the case of homosexuality, homosexual marriage is a good example. There are religious sects who claim that their doctrine forbids homosexual marriage because it's going to do damage to the children, it's going to do damage to family relations. Well, there's a lot of evidence, despite the statistical confusion, there's a lot of pretty solid evidence that the homosexual marriages don't have an adverse effect on children. That was the biggest issue. So, and they don't have an adverse effect on heterosexual marriages because homosexuals who are to that degree, homosexuals to that degree, cannot change, and that's been established. That wasn't known. It was assumed that they could change for up until the 1960s and 70s. Until the research started coming in, they couldn't change. So now there are people who are bisexual. They can switch either way, but I'm talking about the extremes. So there's a case where the reliability of the scientific data is up against religion. And then, of course, there's the economic incentives. We know that that the various oil companies and so on have launched massive campaigns to fudge the science as much as they can. And they do it, and we know why they're doing it. There's not too much of a mystery to that. And now another source is totalitarianism. There are various creeds, some versions of Marxist socialism, some versions of extreme capitalism, versions of monarchists. They're monarchists in the world. They start with certain assumptions which they assume are true and which science cannot challenge. We're better off under a monarch. We're better off in a capitalist economy all the way down. We're better turtles all the way down. We're better off with a socialist economy, and then there are assumptions they make. And the science tears apart these basic assumptions because the human behavior happens to be more complicated, and human society happens to be more complicated, and these assumptions, these axioms, just don't deal well with complications. So, now to give you an example of how this gets, in Russia, in 1936, there was a meeting of the Central Committee of the Communist Party, Joseph Stalin chairman, And they issued a fatwa. They issued a statement, a law to apply to all of the Soviet Union. And it outlawed behaviorism. Actually did. They actually named that behaviorism. They called it, they outlawed behaviorism. Why did they outlaw behaviorism? Because it denied free will. That's in the fatwa. And why were they worried about free will? Well, here you had this work as paradise, and if you couldn't see the morality of it, if you couldn't agree with the morality of it, it was because you were a selfish person. Your free will was choosing to check the obvious, because the premises are obvious. There's no way to question the premises. This is it has to be a work in paradise, Marx said so. So free will has long been a refuge for scoundrels, and it goes against scientific reliability. Now there's room for a small range of probability and so on, which the quantum mechanics talk about, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about massive free will, where science has nothing to say about the human behavior. Now, whether quantum mechanics is true or not, we're waiting on that. We don't know. That's a lot of controversy. So, in Nazi Germany, behaviorism was also outlawed. And there, the argument was different. The argument was that political rule was an art, and Hitler was this great artist who was creating this work of art, which was Germany. And by participating with Hitler, in building Germany, you were participating in the building of this great work of art. And a lot of assumptions have flowed from this. There was a beauty in human behavior. There was a beauty to way people thought and were. And so, unfortunately, Jews were ugly, and pure Germans were the height of beauty from the German perspective. This was a philosophy very much based on perspectivism. So we're right because we feel we're right, because we feel the beauty of the German people. You're not German, so you can't feel our beauty. It's not within your perspective. You can't grasp it. But we're not going to argue with you. It's like arguing with a frog. The frog doesn't get it. So that's another source for the war in science. Now, I might tack on here just another piece, and that is, what is the difference between a science and a technology? If you're a scientist in an extreme, if you're a pure scientist in his extreme mode, is motivated by curiosity. He wants to come up with a description of the universe, which is as reliable as possible. That's in his research program. He might start on a research program that he knows will not be finished for 2 or 3 centuries. But that's all right, because he sees himself as part of a bigger effort that's going to last 2 or